Hey guys, so this is the piece we're going to be ending off with today. It is a portrait of a character named Offrestian Hopsted, whose name means Arrow Golem High Float. Hey guys, how's it going? It's Frank with Redphone Studios. I've had this project sitting on my computer for pretty close to 2 weeks, like a week and a half, somewhere around there. Because I just have no idea how I'm going to talk about this character without them coming across like a total edgelord. But I'm going to go forward anyways and just do my best, because that's what I do in my art, so that's what I'll do in my recording as well. So the main premise for this character was actually birthed out of a lore mistake on my part. The way the magic works in Saphira is magic is the physical manifestation of anything that doesn't otherwise really exist. Like, fire doesn't naturally exist in the world, and weather doesn't naturally exist in the world. But it kind of gets into weird technicalities about, like... I'm sure I've mentioned this in other videos, but, like, healing happens as a natural process of the body, but there's also a magic devoted to it, and weight is also a property of the world, but sort of the harnessing of magic, or of weight, is to say, doesn't exist in Saphira, so those two are classed as schools of magic, and thus are able to be used and wielded by the characters. As a consequence of that system that I have set up, where the magic is that which does not exist, light is something that doesn't naturally exist or happen in the world. It's something that the people of Saphira created. And now they actually do have a sun, but that's thanks to a very powerful group of wizards who ended up calling themselves sun mages. And it's the job of any and all sun mages to, every morning, every 24-hour cycle, although I'm not sure how they count it. They've probably got some method of counting it. But every morning, they will create the sun on the horizon, have it traverse the sky, and then have it disappear in the evening as a sunset. And that's the way that it's probably worked for hundreds and hundreds of years. But the reason why I say this character was born from a lore mistake was because I put a bunch of stars and moons in the background. And while stars and moons are pretty and beautiful, there would be no logical reason for them to really exist. You don't need light when everyone is supposed to be sleeping. And the sun mages, because of another consequence of the way that the magic works, they don't need, or they do need, I should say, to sleep. They have the same biological needs as everyone, and the magic is based on how much stamina you have. It's a physical process rather than... I'm really not sure how a lot of other series do it. Harry Potter, it seems they just kind of hand wave it, where the magic comes from and the kind of energy it takes. At least from what I've seen, and I've only seen the movies, so feel free to, I don't know, crucify me or whatever. But in Percy Jackson, they kind of push a little bit into that, how does the magic work and where does it come from kind of thing, where when Percy first awakens his powers, he can feel it as a tugging in his gut, but they don't really show the physical limits of the power, which is fine. Like, not every series has to, but when it comes to creating comparisons and correlations, it does make it a little bit difficult. But it is basically exactly like running. It takes... You breathe heavier, your muscles ache where you're ejecting the magic from. It's based on your body's energy rather than your soul's energy. So the sun mages would also need time to sleep, which I put the stars and the moon in for kind of the same reason I put the clouds in, which is to fill the space with something to look at, so it wasn't just a flat sky with Offrestian hanging out in front of it. But once I ended up taking out the moon and the stars, it looked surprisingly calm. Like, it was just clean in a way that I hadn't anticipated. So I ended up sticking with it, and I sort of formed Offrestian's character around the idea of they are entirely alone in the world. And I've extended that out to essentially they feel like being alive as a Renian is a bit of a curse, because they're almost sort of on the border of being alive and not being alive. They were created out of life magic, similar to ME946A, but they don't have flesh. I haven't really come up with how this species would die, but it would probably be due to either old age or by their life essence spilling out, which for most creatures is essentially blood, and for the Renian is also essentially blood, but for some creatures it would be different. And the fact that he also can't even speak with his familiar, which is essentially the only person that he has around him a lot of the time, I imagine he tends to self-isolate himself a lot, which, you know, doesn't really help with his feeling of isolation. And another thing that adds into it is his high float, which in a kind of a broader metaphorical sense keeps him high off the ground and away from essentially everything that he would ever want to be near or could ever want to be near. And of course he's got explosion magic, because I don't know what's better for lonely people than being able to blow people up from a distance. His arrow that he has as a familiar is kind of a strike of inspiration, I think, for me. It has a crystal on the end similar to... I feel like there's got to be one other character I've drawn to this point that has something similar, but I can't think of it off the top of my head. But it's got a gem with a specific confluence property wherein it can pass magical energy through it without being necessarily harmed or destroyed by it. Like, Chris's sword, if she had explosion magic, she would certainly be able to detonate it, but it would be more like a grenade than kind of like I don't know what else you could possibly compare it to. Like a flashbang, I guess. It doesn't entirely destroy its form, it just passes it through, whereas any metal would hold on to that confluence property. Or hold on to the magic, I should say. I'm getting my terms confused. But yeah, their explosion magic helps them out in a lot of different ways, and it also informed the design of their hover pattern, which is not so much intended to look just like an explosion in and of itself, but is intended to look like the magic symbol I had created for explosion, which I'm not even sure if that's still the magic symbol for it. I think it is, but I'm not 100% sure. But the reason I say that their arrow was kind of a strike of inspiration is because I'm not going to say it was 100% me taking a similar idea to Guardians of the Galaxy with Yondu. God, I can't remember his name. But it is a pretty similar idea in that Offrestian is able to control where the arrow goes and essentially give it commands almost kind of psychically, which I think a lot of the Renian can do. They don't need to speak necessarily to enact their will through their familiar. They just need to think about it and desire it and will it, if that makes any sense. And of course, they would need to say whatever name of the spell they were using in order to have it manifest, which is something that I haven't put a ton of thought into, and I don't think I'm going to, about how the Renian are able to speak, because I definitely imagine that they are able to speak, although they don't have mouths, or eyes, or ears, which is an interesting thought process, but it's probably just whatever. Some things I think are better off hand-waved than continuing to try and explain them. As we get closer to the end of this video, I think I was trying to draw the moon that I would end up taking out of the image, and I added a blue filter over top just so it just kind of completed it for me. The gentle blue filter. And of course here I am spending so much time creating this moon. I spent a long time getting the moon just right because I wanted it to look perfect. And then I thought to myself, you know, they probably don't have anything resembling a moon. It wouldn't make sense. So I ended up having to scrap that, which was all sorts of fun, and I loved doing that. But yeah, I didn't end up doing it in the video. I ended up going in and removing it in post, but it's not a big deal. It's some minor details. But yeah, so this is what we ended off with. Overall, I'm relatively happy, and something I'm going to mention and show off in the next video is I would end up going back in. I'm not sure if you can see it in the actual image of this one, but I would end up going back in and adding some stone-like texture to all of the Renian, including some cracks, because I tried it on one of the characters, the next character that you're going to see, Galatian, and I loved how it looked. So, in short, look forward to that. This has been Frank with Redphone Studios, and this has been a drawing of Offrestian Hopsted, and I will be signing out. See ya. Bye.